Welcome, everybody. This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read a book this week.
I watched a play this week. Yes, finally, it is upon us. We are doing Hamilton. We just watched it last night. It was awesome. I've waited. I didn't know a thing about it. I was stoked to find out that Disney was releasing this on Disney+. Taylor, you also watched it as well.
I saw it. I did see it because I, too, waited, didn't listen to any of the album when it came out, wanted to see it all, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, that was hands down the way to go. I mean, there was like a couple lines I had heard before, but it was awesome seeing it all for the first time. I really wish I had been able to see it in person, but seeing it with the original cast, there's really a special. It's very, very special to see it in this way.
The premise, the story of America then, told by America now, which we'll get into what all of that means. Hamilton, we won't go into too much. I was talking to Evan before this, and if you want to see what was different from real life versus the musical, you can Google that.
That kind of stuff. We're a little bit behind on this. We're covering the home release of it, but if you want to see what really in the kind of the historical was this true kind of thing, that stuff is really readily available all over the internet.
There's a million articles.
So kind of in vein with our kind of artist studies, we are going to really kind of get into how this thing came to be, the process and why and how it is what it is. It's a very particular animal. If you don't know, it is a totally R&B. It is rapped beginning to end, hip-hop, everything, beginning to end.
No dialogue.
None.
3 hours of straight music.
It's staggering. And right off the top, probably the most outstanding element about that really just took my breath away was how they were able to get intonation into character through the lines.
The way people rap are different.
Exactly. You would hear the character in the canter of the language.
George Washington's cadence is regimented and on beat because that's how he is. It's just crazy. Yeah.
At least for everybody's introduction, it is on point. And I thought that was just staggering. That's just one little taste of what they're doing here, specifically to the music, the R&B themes that really wrap this thing together.
And this is jam-packed. I saw Hamilton has over 20,000 words spoken, which is 144 words a minute.
Oh my gosh.
It is the most dense
type that.
musical. So the runner-up musical is Spring Awakening, which only has 77 words a minute on average. If Hamilton were sung at the usual pace of most musicals, it would be 6 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's part of, as we go into the book, the appeal of making it into something that is hip-hop oriented.
For anybody who's curious, it runs about 2 hours and 40 minutes when you watch it, and it does have a 1 minute intermission.
But it is quite full. So much information.
Yeah. 2 C's on that one.
So just before we get into the book, Hamilton, for those that don't know, his list of things. First Treasury Secretary, had the first budget system, first tax system. He created the Coast Guard, the Customs Service, monetary policy, the central bank, and was kind of the founding father of Wall Street.
Wow.
Which is odd for our time when we think about money and the 1% and whatnot, but all of these systems that then created
right there from
the ability for the country to be, it's like he is the creator of our government as it orients, because he also did the Federalist Papers and was involved in the Constitution. You know, he was the mind behind a lot of this stuff, but never a president, and died at age 49 because of a duel, got shot. So let's talk about how Lin-Manuel Miranda heard about all this.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was most interested in. Okay, I've never heard really the details I've heard of Alexander Hamilton, but I've never heard any of these details of his life, and never really occurred to me why I've not heard more about him and why he didn't become a president. It just never occurred to me, and because there's just kind of a hole there. But it's very interesting. So that's kind of my outset is like, okay, well, how did Lin-Manuel find this, and where did he really attach to it? Where did he find his power in it?
So Ron Chernow is where we start. He is the author of the book Alexander Hamilton. He was a journalist. He had written some big biographies of famous people in finance.
Okay.
So he wrote one about J.P. Morgan in 1990, which won the National Book Award for nonfiction.
Flew off the shelves.
Yeah. Really popular. And then he wrote one about Rockefeller in 1998, which was a New York Times
sequel
bestseller. But he didn't want to get pigeonholed into, I'm just doing finance bios. So he was like, well, the big market really for biographies is politicians or historical people of that nature. So he said he brought a list of 16 ideas to his agent, and she picked the 16th one, which was Hamilton, which, as we can see, he was Treasury Secretary. He's still involved in finance in some way, so it's not quite out of his wheelhouse, but just enough to where he's not pegged as the finance bio guy.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
And he said later that he went to a preview once it finally became the musical with her, and he told her, he's like, the show is here because of you. Because you were the one that said I should do this one.
Yeah.
And Hamilton was about to fade into obscurity were it not for the reinvigoration of interest in him.
Man, that's incredible. I mean, again, I say this all the time, but you don't know your impact. I mean, just because of that one decision by her, that allowed the show to exist. Without that, because
he could have done something about Vanderbilt or, Yeah, exactly. So he started the book in 1998 when the Rockefeller book came out. He went through, now remember, Hamilton has over 20,000 words. Ron Chernow goes through 22,000 pages of papers and documents. That's one of the big things of the musical is Hamilton is a prolific writer.
Yeah.
He spends so much time writing.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy that as many words as are in the musical is how many pages Ron Chernow went through.
Oh my gosh.
Of material.
Just combing through it.
He is a master of research.
Can you imagine? Oh my gosh.
He also went tangible, which I thought was great. He held the dueling pistols that they used in the duel. He visited the jail cell on St. Croix where Hamilton's mother was imprisoned.
Wow.
He went to the island where Hamilton's father ran away and disappeared to. He had a lock of Hamilton's hair tested for his racial makeup. He did research on his own.
Really? Oh my gosh.
As opposed to just looking through documents in the physical space.
Wow.
Yeah. And there had been research. It's not like he's the first person to ever research Hamilton. These documents are available, but he is the main one to stand on the shoulders of other people as well as saying, well, let me piece this narrative, because why is he faded into obscurity?
Right. Why is this narrative all broke? Why am I doing this work? Hasn't somebody done this before? Yeah.
Yeah. So the book then comes out in 2004. It was on the New York Times bestsellers list when it came out, but still just in the strata of people that like what they call dad fiction, just big nonfiction books about history. It was, he said, I thought that this was interesting, optioned 3 times for a feature film in Hollywood.
Really?
Once it came out, because he's like, I was surprised, but then of course
Since
it goes
2004.
Yeah, it goes into the black hole of that sort of thing. But he's like, it is a Hollywood thing. It's about this self-starter who figures everything out. It's got sex scandals, it's got violence, it's got everything that Hollywood would
absolutely.
like. But it never became anything.
Fascinating. Any idea who was kind of circling around that?
He didn't say. No. And now that it's become the musical and it's already out and whatever, you know, Lin-Manuel, they're going to him to say, would you want to make this into a film? But if it's already on Disney Plus as the...
Right.
He's like, I don't see it becoming anything. So now we have to go to the other side of this, which is Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Right.
This is 2008, 4 years after the book comes out. He's 28 years old. He's doing a Broadway show called In the Heights on Broadway.
Right, okay.
And that won a bunch of awards, and he's made his name as a very young... prosperous person on Broadway. He's on a vacation in Mexico. In the airport, picks up this book, reads it. In the first chapters, he's like, oh, this is my next project.
Oh, man.
Ron Chernow was saying in an interview that I saw, there's also a seed of like, why'd he even pick up this book in the first place? And like, that was found that in high school, Lin had done a paper on the duel between him and Aaron Burr. So he did have a little bit of context just from his own education. So he's like, I've got to meet the guy who wrote this because this is going to be my next musical project, if not a musical, at least an album of some music.
Do you think that's why he picked up the book in a way, perhaps, is because he had studied it to a degree as a child in school?
Maybe. There's a little familiarity.
Here is actually somebody's put the whole story of this dude together. I mean, it's weird enough to me that a definitive biography of Alexander Hamilton is only coming out in 2004.
Right.
You know, so that alone, it's not like that book exists before 2004. He knows who Alexander Hamilton is from high school doing papers on him. Yeah. Let me see what he was really all about.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
What's even more serendipitous than the fact that he might have already been inclined to this material is the fact that Ron Chernow met Lin through a crazy connection. So Ron's friend's daughter had gone to college with Lin, and she had kept in touch with Lin, and she knew that he was interested in the book. So she was like, oh, my dad is friends with the guy who wrote the book. So
no way.
Yeah.
Good Lord. Okay.
So
what a beautiful coincidence.
Yeah. So Lin-Manuel Miranda invites Ron Chernow, say, hey, I'm doing this show in the Heights. Would you want to come see it? So then he goes and sees that.
Yeah.
And then, knows that, oh, he's interested in my book. So he goes to meet him backstage. And Lin-Manuel is like, I read this and, hip hop just jumped off the page. And Ron Chernow's like, really? Because
really?
He's like, yeah, Hamilton's life is a classic hip hop narrative. And this is Ron said, he was like, I could see that Lin had met one of the great hip hop ignoramuses of all time. He's like, I don't know anything about what you're talking about. And he's so also, there's these other musicals that had come out, Jesus Christ Superstar, more satirical takes. Maybe, that one's not quite satirical, but just like he didn't want it to be a parody or mocking or not do the material justice. And Lin asked him on the spot, he said, hey, can you be the historical consultant for this project?
Oh, wow.
And Lin had said, I want the historians to take this seriously,
yeah,
which is music to Ron's ears.
That makes sense. Yeah. So now he's ready to go. He's like, okay, he's perking up.
Yeah. And like we talked about the amount of material in this, that also helped Ron understand, because he's like, I understand hip hop in the sense that you can pack more information in than any musical form.
Yeah.
As well as you had mentioned with the rhymes and the patterns of language, how important that was to Hamilton. The wheels are turning and it's clicking for him even as a historian. So he says, okay, show me what you got when you have something.
Yeah.
It's great because he ends up working with him for 6 years on this thing until it comes out and he comes to performances and whatnot. At the moment of this point, though, Lin-Manuel Miranda is just calling it the Hamilton mixtape. He's just going to write a song because he's still doing 8 shows a week of In the Heights.
Oh, okay. So it's like the Hamilton demo.
Yeah, it's a concept album, and maybe he'll find a way to stage it. It's not even yet the whole idea.
So
of
it's
what
just
it
starting
has
with the
become.
music. It's really just starting with that, the staging, all that kind of stuff. The idea to even make it a play is totally later.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so 2 or 3 months later, then Lin invites Ron Chernow to his house, sings him the first song. Ron Chernow is like so impressed because he saw how he compressed the first 40 pages of his book into a 4-minute song.
Oh, man.
And he's
that must
able...
be invigorating, man, as a writer. Oh, my gosh. To see that somebody got it, was able to turn it into something else, and very well done something else.
And also sees the genius of he's combining 1800s words with modern words, and it's fluid, and also a little bit disconcerting to be like, I spent so much time on these 40 pages. And you just put it into this form. So then they're off to the races.
That's awesome.
They're off to the races working together. Lin spent an entire year working on that song. Like he didn't then jump on to the next thing, refining it. So in May of 2009, he was invited to perform at the White House's Evening of Poetry, Music, and Spoken Word.
Oh.
And they said, oh, you're doing In the Heights. Do you have anything that speaks to the American experience? So instead of doing something from In the Heights, he takes a gamble and he performs that song from his Hamilton mixtape project. Gets a standing ovation. This is what propels him to pursue it even more with his director that he's worked on from In the Heights.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I'll post a link to that video. And it's sort of comical because he's saying, oh yeah, I found this character from American history that really embodies hip hop, the first Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, and everybody in the audience laughs. And even in the moments, but the song is pretty much the same from what it ended up being. So now he spends another year working on the second song, and his collaborators are like, "Well, we're all going to be dead before
we get
there's over
10
30
songs. Yeah,
there's over 30 songs in the final thing." I love though the fact
he
that
took a song, one song a year.
Yeah.
It's like, no, just one a year.
So that's also part of the writer's deadline dilemma of he's like, I got to pick up the pace if this is ever going to become anything. But again, is it going to be a big musical? There's no guarantee that it's even going to be on Broadway if it becomes anything, because it isn't anything yet. It's 2 songs.
Yeah.
So I love how Ron Chernow had been hearing the songs as they're being made. He said Lin is a huge rewriter. So is he in terms of their process. They were basically up to the point of recording the cast album, changing things in the lyrics, which after that you can't, because then that's the show.
That is it. That's really awesome to have the two. I had no idea that the writer of the biography would be that much lockstep with the star writer of the show.
Very, very involved in the process. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, right up until the cast recording, figuring out what was the best for it all between the two, because Lin is the hip hop, the music. he is the history.
Yeah.
And it takes both of that to get the kind of the magic blend that is the show.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important here for any creatives or collaborators out there.
Yeah.
That's the key right there.
Or if he's, Lin is like, I see this book and I want to do this. Why don't I just get the guy who did the book to help me? Instead of poring over it and thinking I know.
I love that the biographer actually is like, even though he doesn't know anything or even like it, but he thinks it's cool and he's excited that his material lives on and is going on in different forms and is getting people interested and is actually passing on the story and the knowledge beyond just the the aesthetic of how it was done. That it's really, really staggering that the biographer is like, this is cool, man.
And I'll post links to all the interviews and everything that I saw, but he has such a genial, warm personality as well. You can tell that their energy matches. He's humorous, he's humble, all of those things that you want from somebody. So he goes to a big moment is the first rehearsal studio casting session where they're checking people out, and not in a racist way at all, but he's glad he didn't blurt out what he was thinking, because he comes in there and this is about the founding fathers and he's written the book and he spent, years and years and years doing this, and he comes in and everybody's a different race in it, and he was just like, oh, I didn't think, why didn't I even think that was going to be a thing? And he said the other thing that struck him was not only everybody is different races, but they're young. Too, which we think of people as being old. And he's like, that really more captured the spirit of the founding fathers. He also loved later on, you see in the costume design, from the neck down, they're 18th century, but from the neck up, they're 21st century.
Oh, man. I did not.
All the hairstyles and everything is not period.
Interesting. Oh man, now I'm going back and thinking about specific characters. I'm going like, now knowing it is a detail and that it's specific and meant to be that way. I'm like, oh, that is a 21st century haircut. It's not just the dude's hair, that. Wow.
So Ron is now completely bought into this. He's like, in the first 10 seconds, you don't care that George Washington isn't white or Thomas Jefferson is, like, it doesn't matter. This is what this thing is. And it was, of course, intentional from Lin-Manuel Miranda the whole time, but it took Ron seeing it, and he has even more a vote of confidence in the process and the production, as well as him just giving little tidbits or being a sounding board for what's historically accurate or not. Ron praised Lin-Manuel Miranda for being very responsive to his comments. For example, there's a
that's the other big thing here as far as creators and collaborators go, is like being able to give and receive criticism.
He was saying at the very, very end, there's a bit where, the last things are coming up. There's sort of an epilogue of what has happened, what other people thought of him. And Ron was saying, I really feel like there should be a moment where Madison acknowledges that he had taken the country from bankruptcy to a flourishing nation. Like, that was a part of it that you don't have in the end. And so that's exactly what he puts in at the very, very end there. Madison is saying, oh, he gave us our country credit.
Wow.
It's still in a lyrical way. He explains it, but it's like he just was taking all of Ron Chernow's things. Even that's more of a creative lens, but it was still a historical thing.
It was a Chernow thought, and then it was purported through Lin-Manuel Miranda's not Lynn's, his speaker. His lyricism. That's beautiful. Man, God, how, just if your middle school brain was ever confused of what is art. So I think we just explained it to you about how things move and are recontextualized and remade and live on through that. And what does it say?
And the endurance of multiple people. So I haven't mentioned the other people. So it's Lin-Manuel Miranda, what they call the cabinet meetings. Alex Lacamoire was the music director, arranger, orchestrator, conductor, and keyboard player. He's also the one at the Obama White House spoken poetry. He's the guy playing the keyboard. So he was in on it from the beginning. And then Thomas Kail is the director who also worked with Lin-Manuel Miranda for In the Heights. So they're always meeting, and Ron Chernow putting it together.
I love it.
Yeah. It's also funny because I just looked into Ron Chernow's stuff. He also wrote a biography of George Washington that came out in 2010 and won the Pulitzer Prize for biography. So that's like his writing stuff that he was
also doing
that. Yeah.
That's great.
I thought from the creative standpoint, though, Ron said he was very open. The director was very open, but he said he never talked to actors in the rehearsals. Like, he was involved, he was there, but he only ever talked to Lin or Thomas Kail, the director, because he was like, unless the actors asked. There were some people that were like Christopher Jackson, who played George Washington, wanted to know more about the history and what was going on and all that, which in some way inspired him to do the biography of George Washington.
Oh, wow.
But there are other actors who didn't consult him on their historical
things. That actor's just trying to get another gig. Come on. Yeah, I'm really interested in George now that I got this part. You know, have you ever done any more? Or you ever wanted to do a play on him?
But yeah, so the big thing, though, was Ron was saying, like, he didn't want to create conflict with the lyrics. He's like, now, I wrote this book. I'm doing the historical fluff for them. But if I don't want to say, like, well, that didn't happen, this or that, or if an actor asks me, I'm not going to then create a conflict with
mucking it up.
Dramatically Lin-Manuel Miranda is trying to do.
Yeah, there's like a chain of command there. And like, with that type of collaborator of like, okay, well, he's the aesthetic person. The actor is a tool of the aesthetic. Lin should talk to the, like those types of things, and knowing your boundaries, especially as a group of collaborators. When is it your forte? When is this your area? When is that their area? Learning.
Now I'm going to sit in the rehearsal and be a cheerleader, and then whenever they
be a resource, not a
a voice.
Yes.
So now it's 2013. They are performing a workshopped production. It's still called the Hamilton Mixtape. It's the first act and 3 songs from the second act. Okay. So it still isn't even what it ends up being. It ends up becoming the thing it is at the Public Theater, so off-Broadway, in February of 2015.
Okay.
Immediately, everything's sold out. People are crazy. Right. Jimmy Fallon goes. The Obamas go. Everybody goes. Yeah. It's crazy. Goes on Broadway in August of that year.
Wow.
And then at the 2016 Tony Awards, 16 nominations, 11 wins. It has the record for number of nominations and was one short for the record of wins.
Wow. Swept, huh?
Golly. The musical itself won the 2016 Pulitzer Prize for drama.
Wow.
Which usually only one.
That is, I want to say, because the thing is rather comedic. Right. And it's a musical, so it like it very easily could be just sequestered as a musical comedy.
Well, and that's what's interesting. I looked into it.
So the win for drama is like really amazing.
Usually,
actually,
one musical a decade will win that award, but it's mostly plays that get that. Yeah. The cast album also. So now it's an album. CDs and vinyl, and it debuted at number 12 on the Billboard charts. It was up to number 3 at one point, and it was number 1 on the rap album charts.
Oh, cool.
In 2016. Yeah. And then, of course, it won a Grammy.
Oh, man.
The success didn't stop with what the musical ended up doing. The book, the sales were at around 3,000 copies in 2014, because remember, this had come out 10 years before. Yep. The next year, 2015, when the musical comes out, it jumped up to 105,000 copies.
Oh, man. Look at how the writer also, by investing in the show, in turn invested right back in himself.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. That's
and I
pretty
think
crazy.
He gets a percentage, obviously, because he was involved. Yes. So he's making 7 figures a year,
oh my God,
on all this stuff. He's also seen it about 50 times, he said, including the public theater versions.
Man, I love this.
And he said he has such a great relationship with the cast. He'd always go backstage. He said he, for whatever reason, had a great fatherly feeling.
That's what it feels like. It feels like at the end of like the last one, he like cried and didn't want to say goodbye to people.
Well, that's what he said. He said from the second, from the second I passed it off to Lin-Manuel, it was never my job to criticize. He was like, I was just the main cheerleader for the show. I was there all the time. It was these young actors, and I'm this old fatherly figure who I am going to then give them the encouragement.
Oh, that must have been the experience of a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to watch that unfold. You've done this work, you put together this narrative, you put out this book, it's okay, it's done all right, and then this group of artists come around it and make this out of it, and it goes worldwide. It's a phenomena. And to be in his shoes, to stand back and watch all that just kind of unfold.
Yeah.
And to not be resistful of it, but to see the beauty in it, even from the start, to go, oh, I don't understand this. This isn't exactly me, but this is awesome.
Yeah.
That this is being kept alive. that this is actually being passed around, that this story is being told at all.
Yeah. And not to diminish by any means, I know we haven't gone too much into Lin-Manuel Miranda's.
Right.
He did everything for this. Yeah. That's not to say, but I feel like it's the story of the book becoming this thing is not something. It's just like, oh, he read the book and then he turned it into this thing.
I have
There's
not
so
heard anything
more
about Chernow until today. Hardly.
Yeah.
I mean, for real.
And he truly was a part of the team.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say. Is it sounds like he was such an integral part of this. I mean, really, it comes down. Lin-Manuel is the creative, the aesthetic, and he is the history. I mean, it's 50-50 on this, creates that blend, like I said earlier. It's that special blend that makes this so unique and really just pop off of the screen. Mm-hmm. That's why people are so crazy about it.
And he said in terms of the craziness, they open the backstage doors to let out into the alleyway, and people have their playbills for the cast to sign and everything. And he was like, people had books for me to sign.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he said some guy even
like a rock star, finally. Yeah. That's great.
He's like, why did you bring this book to the... He said he even signed a $10 bill, which is illegal, so nobody come after him to deface currency. Speaking of which, the $10 bill, so 2015, the Department of the Treasury was planning on redesigning it to feature a woman from American history. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, because of the craziness of Hamilton, people didn't even really know who he was when he was on the 10. Now everybody knows, and so they changed it. And that was when the whole thing was, we're going to replace Jackson on the 20 with Harriet Tubman.
Right.
Which never came to be. If you're interested in... So now we have this thing that is on Disney Plus, and what that was recorded in 2016 when they were still the original cast doing it on Broadway. They got a director of photography who spent 2 months watching the performances and reading the script to try and figure out how...
You can tell.
Because it was a live recording. There was an audience
there.
You
can tell. This is... I'm coming from somebody who knows how this stuff is kind of pieced together. You can see... They were really specific about what camera angles they used when they used certain types of coverage, when they went in, when they went wide, what they chose to focus on. It's really discrete editing. I mean, most people have probably seen like a stand-up special and never really seen it. Mm-hmm. You don't realize that that's actually cut out together of like 3 or 4 performances.
Yeah.
So I was really pleased to see the work of the intent of the shot there. They were really, this is what you're supposed to be focused on now.
It wasn't just the whole stage and then switching to the left and switching to the right.
It's very, very, very dynamic in a way that they couldn't this is obviously pulled together from a couple different runs of this, because you can't get the coverage they have and then pull out for a wide of the whole thing like they do.
Yeah.
And because of that, they're able to pull together the best moments of the best pieces. So it just really pops. That was just as on a craft note, was palpable from the first few moments of it, and it kept all the way through.
Yeah, so they had 9 cameras that he stationed around the Richard Rodgers Theater, and the main ones were covered with black so that the audience wouldn't be seeing or distracting to anybody. They shot a Sunday matinee and a Tuesday evening show. And then for all of the steady cam and crane stuff, they did 13 of the 46 numbers that way with no audience, but just to be able to be on stage and get the close-ups.
Get in and get really close stuff and not bother anybody's experience.
And then they had over 100 microphones for sound.
The sound, I've got to say, the sound in this was incredible. We just got a 5.1 system in ours, so we were shaking the floor, but the mix of this is just gorgeous.
A little bit of the history comparison kind of stuff, or at least in regards to the book, that I found interesting. So a facet of the book and what is odd about the musical is usually it just ends. But they have in the musical, not to spoil anything, an epilogue where they kind of go into, because it's not a spoiler that he dies, what happens after, which is a bit bizarre for the musical context, and then just go through each character and be like, what did they do? What did they do? This and that, whatnot. And the big one that it ends with is his wife, who lived 50 years after. She died at age 97.
Right.
And she tried to do so much stuff, which factors into the thematics of
who
tells your story and whatnot. Yeah, but it's crazy because in the book, that is a narrative device of Ron Chernow's. The first preface of the book is from the perspective of Eliza. And then the ending, the epilogue, is also her and her perspective and what she did. And it's crazy how, I don't know if people know this because most people haven't read the book, but Lin-Manuel Miranda took that for the ending of the musical to say, oh no, this should be ending from her perspective.
Yes, because that's the like, back to the reason of who's going to tell your story, who's around to do it. She's the reason. Mm-hmm. She is solely the reason that this is actually being put together, and any of his information was really saved. That was kind of staggering because the last few moments of the thing really, really becomes hers. Character that's been done wrong through the course of the play. Suddenly she's the main character for the last 10 minutes or so, and all of the thematics come around and hit right on her character, because you realize what it's all for by now. I mean, without spoiling anything, like we've been said about who and why is your legacy going to be passed down. She's the reason that we know any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really an amazing way for this to end. I mean, it's about Alexander Hamilton, but for this to really become hers at the end felt so right, felt so fitting.
And there has been some controversy now as it stands of the musical came out in 2016. Obviously, the world has changed. People are thinking about things differently. The question of slavery, should it have been brought up more in the context of the musical? Lots of different political topics brought up. But I think the thing outside of all of that, Lin-Manuel acknowledges it, and he's like, valid. Every criticism is valid. It is the same show. It is different times. Please let it be a vessel for people to talk about these things.
Yes,
but I think
it spark conversation.
Yeah, the big thing that he got from it personally in what I saw was, what am I doing with my life? It's constantly brought up that Hamilton is living 5 times the life, and he died at 49.
Yeah.
Lin was saying, if the show opens and closes in a day, will I regret the 6 years that I put into it? It just gives him, and a lot of the stuff he had his first child when it was being, he's thinking about all of these things that Hamilton was thinking about as well, in a weird art imitates life way.
Yes.
But the big quote that I have from him from one of these interviews at the end, he was saying, I feel like Hamilton chose me. He reached out of the pages of Ron's book and wouldn't let me go until I told his story. And I thought it was very aware that he said, I can't manufacture another Hamilton. I'll never write another Hamilton. It's singular, the man in the creation of the show. And then he goes on, I feel like my responsibility is to keep my eyes open and live it as slowly as possible. Because I'm aware that musical theater doesn't get off the arts page very often. And obviously here it has. But just that whole energy, I think, encapsulates a lot of it. And like I said, that's the conversation. Who's telling the story? Yeah. Obviously, I just told the story of this. But if Lin-Manuel Miranda was telling the story of how it got made, it would be completely different. And he acknowledges that. And that's the biggest piece of it, I think.
I didn't really expect the making of this to be as joyous as it sounds like nobody took this for granted. And that's really nice to feel.
The performers, the creators,
nobody. Everybody seemed to really, really dig in on this, really feel there was a reason to tell this story, believe in the story. Hearing Lin-Manuel and the biographer come together like that is just like, there's nothing better. Creatively, there's nothing better than that.
Very cool.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Taylor. This has been a blast. So check us out on our Instagram page, @illiteratepod, and we will catch you next week.